in the world of Quantum Black. The Outback Tunnels. Written by Adrian Lee. Based off the characters created by the players in the Team Corvidae role-playing game campaign. It's been only 3 weeks since Team Corvidae returned from Antarctica. Dr. Aubrey Hartman from Quantum Black Mission Support had required the team to take 21 days of rest and recuperation. The sixth member of the team, Zigzag, had disappeared after the mission and his status was still considered missing in action. Hartman noted in his file it must have been from extreme mental anguish, following their encounters in the South Pole. Encountering alien technology, let alone monsters, was not something to be taken lightly. She had required the remaining team members take leave to recover from the stress of their experiences. But now that was over, and it was time to get back to work. Dr. Desdemona, Jess, Tori, Shouma, Amber Fox, and Morthos all arrived at the safe house. Duffel bags and backpacks are tossed on various beds in the house, while the team's standard security checks are done. The team was a little paranoid after what they've been through so far and always checked for bugs and cameras. They never trusted a safe house till they checked it themselves. They figured it wouldn't be odd for Quantum Black itself to spy on them. But this safe house was clean, and just as they were about to settle down for a late-night pizza dinner, the call from Quantum Black Mission Control came through. Corvidae's next assignment would take them all the way across the world. Strange readings were showing up on seismic sensors in Australia. Something deep below the surface seems to be sending tremors. Or perhaps, signals. All sourced from one specific location. Mission Control suspected that something had happened in an old abandoned mine and wanted to see if there was a supernatural, or perhaps an extraterrestrial threat. They said this should be a quick recon mission. Simple, in and out. Quote, a very low-risk mission, unquote. It would be perfect for Team Corvidae's first mission after their lengthy time off. The entire team shared skeptical looks with each other. Missions never felt low risk, especially their last encounters in Antarctica. Undoubtedly, there was something going on out there, or they wouldn't be sent halfway across the world to investigate. The briefing ended and the team got ready to head out immediately. Their gear was still packed and a QB aircraft was readily available. They could head straight there and sleep on the plane. They arrived at the airport to see a familiar cargo plane waiting for them. It was the same one they've used before. The Quantum Black aircraft ferried them direct to Los Angeles. From there they transferred over to a long-range jet and started their flight to Perth. 21 long hours passed without incident and the jet landed on the opposite side of the world the next day. As they disembarked, they were approached by a man with a sign reading, Mr. Jones. Amber leaned over to Morthos and whispered, "You couldn't make up something less obvious if you tried." "Hey mates, my name is Leo," the man said, pulling them out of the line. "Oh yeah, you're definitely the lot I'm supposed to meet, follow me." He turned, expecting the party to simply follow. The doc took the lead. Morthos followed next. The rest of the team proceeded more hesitantly. The doc followed behind Leo. "I believe we've got a mutual friend." "Ah yeah, my mate got you all set up. Ian's a good guy. He's a good friend to have, that's for doggone sure. Hey, we gotta be quick though, we got a quick schedule to keep. And you know how it is, time is money." Leo instructed Corvidae to jump onto a baggage car with their gear. "We've got her all loaded up. Ian did good for you, that's for sure. Nice airplane, 2 buggies, yeah, he did you good." The baggage car dropped them off at an open hangar bay where a cargo plane was ready and waiting. Mission Support's Chief Supply Officer, Ian Green, had acquired for them an Ilyushin IL-76 cargo plane, and this was the TD model for extra range. Just in case they needed more flight time. Resources outside of the US were hard for him to get in a timely manner, so what they had here was probably all they were going to get. "Bring her back in one piece." Amber patted him on the shoulder with a mischievous smile. "No promises." As the team boarded the plane, they could see there were a few other pieces of gear already stowed in the hold. Corvidae had requisitioned a pair of desert ATVs, and Green had come through. The doctor called out after Amber as she walked towards the cockpit. "This operation is not cheap. We do, in fact, need to return this plane in one piece." He lit a cigar as Amber waved a hand in response. Yeah, I know. Tori followed her to the cockpit, deciding to take the co-pilot's seat. He wanted to familiarize himself with the controls as well. Jess sat down next to Morthos and buckled in. We've done so much flying, I think I'm ready to be done with this. Morthos nodded in agreement and closed the book he had been studying. Almost there, Jess, almost there. The doc let out a puff of smoke as the engines whirred to life. The ramp slowly began to close until the last sliver of daylight was cut off. Amber's voice came over the intercom. Fasten your seatbelts and ready for takeoff, thank you. The doc extinguished his cigar and put it back in its case for later, then obstinately remained standing. He grabbed some overhead webbing as the plane began to taxi. Minutes later the engines roared and the cargo plane lifted off. The hold was loud, so conversation between the doc, Jess, and Morthos was minimal. The occult specialist eventually pulled out his book again and continued reading. Jess put her AirPods in and just watched Morthos go through the book, page by page. She couldn't read the German text, but she did enjoy the pictures. They looked old and grotesque. Morthos seemed very focused though, and she didn't bother him with questions. He was probably just studying for rituals. The doc remained standing, happy to stretch his legs after so many hours in the air. Tori's voice came over the speaker. Perth's behind us, we're about an hour and 15 from the mine. Amber's voice followed. If you look out to the left you'll see the desert coming up. It's really quite pretty. The three in the hold shared a look. There weren't any windows in the cargo bay. I'm sure it is pretty, Morthos offered. Wish we could see it. Jess responded. Morthos shrugged and returned to his book. An hour passed and Amber began the descent. A long run of dirt road stretched below. The makeshift landing strip was located only a few miles from the old mining tunnels. The wheels touched down, bumping a few times as they made contact with the gravel and dirt. The lengthy road worked fine for a runway and the Ilyushin 76 plane rolled to a stop. It took up the whole roadway, but that would be fine. There were no vehicles spotted for the entire last 30 minutes of the flight. They were surrounded by a vast, empty desert with road stretching as far as the eye could see. The plane would be safe here while the team investigates. The cargo ramp lowered, revealing two sets of glaring headlights, and the ATVs roared into the Outback. Tori behind the wheel of the first, and Amber driving the second. Tori accelerated, enjoying the straightaway. He pushed his Polaris to max speed with Amber just behind. Morthos pulled a bandana higher up to avoid breathing in the dust cloud from Tori and Jess's ATV. Beside him, Dr. Desdemona pulled a mask from his medical bag. The breathing apparatus was shaped with a long, hooked nose, almost like that of a beak. Morthos nodded in approval as Desdemona donned the plague doctor mask. Amber veered further left and pushed the throttle to full, slowly creeping up on Tori until they were almost side by side. Jess was scanning the roadway with binoculars. It's up ahead. Amber began to decelerate smoothly while Tori waited until the last moment, hitting the brakes and skidding to a stop. They were just in front of an old access gate. Jess hopped out, chambering around. She stepped up to the gate and looked around. The post was empty and the yellow and black striping was faded and peeling. This entrance hasn't been used in a long time. Well, this is the target location. Dr. Desdemona exited Amber's vehicle, his voice a little distorted by the plague mask. Get the scanners. Amber circled to the back of the Polaris and opened the silver case, another goodie provided by Green. The portable scanner turned on and, sure enough, as soon as it began reading the surroundings for anomalies, the scanner began to ping. There's something down there. It's not a seismic disturbance, which is good. It's actually some sort of power source. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm reading that it's subterranean. Must be in the mine itself. Amber turned the device so Morthos and the doc could see. There's an open shaft over here. Jess called. She had already moved forwards to scout the facility, ducking under the lift gate and moving up to the other structures. There were a few buildings, sheds, a few manufactured houses that were falling apart. The few shipping containers that were still here were empty, and there were signs of others that had been removed long ago. The whole area was empty, however. No signs of life. Not even animals, as far as she could tell. Tori made his way up behind her as she stood at the last point of interest, a wide hole in the ground with an attached elevator lift. The hole was probably about 40 feet in diameter and had been excavated by machinery. She stepped up to the edge and peered down. Of course there's a big hole in the ground. And of course, we have to go down there. Low risk my ass. Tori peered down next to her. I don't know how you're not afraid of heights, Jesus. Yeah, that's pretty deep. Tori looked at Jess and smirked. That's what she said. She rolled her eyes and called back to the rest of the team, we're gonna need rope. Better bring the ATV over here, we can use the winch. The doc was leaning on the entry's lift gate, watching Jess scout the compound. His bag was open, mask off, and he had started up again on the cigar. He turned to Amber. Get that ATV up there. Amber closed the scanner and tossed it in the passenger seat. Sure thing, you want to get that gate open? She barely finished the words when the doc casually turned away from the gate and plugged his ears. A dull boom sounded and the gate arm dropped to the ground, the hinges blown off. Really? Amber climbed into the ATV. Well, I guess that's one way to open the gate. She moved the Polaris up to the mine entrance, backing it up to where Jess was pointing. Why can't just use the elevator? I could get power turned on for it. She held up her sonic screwdriver. Jess shook her head. There's no power to any of this. They've cut most of the wires for all this stuff. Probably for the copper. She looked around. Whatever company owned this place was really stupid. They left so much stuff here. Amber got out of the ATV and looked down the shaft. I wonder what made them leave. The doctor and Morthos came up behind them. Mission Control said it was abandoned, but not why. The anomaly down there is new, as far as we know. Morthos opened his grimoire and began to purposefully walk the circumference of the mine shaft, dropping fistfuls of salt on the ground as he chanted quietly, Dunkelgeister werden gefesselt. Dunkelgeister sind verschwunden. Verlassen Sie diesen Bereich. Du sollst hier kein Macht haben. Lass uns heut in Ruhe. The others watched in silence, letting Morthos complete his ritual. Well, if there's any ghosts down there, they won't be able to come up. Ghosts? Well, what if it's not ghosts? Amber asked, chamber checking her side arm. What if it's like that thing from Antarctica again? If it's another Shoggoth, then I'll need to use a different spell. But Morthos looked down into the mine shaft again. I don't really sense anything down there. The doctor squatted down at the edge and looked down. That's a big ass hole. He flicked the cigar down and watched it fall, the glow getting smaller and smaller until it hit the bottom and was extinguished. The doc started to chuckle and looked up at the others. That's what she said. After many eye rolls, Amber got the winch ready. Well, maybe we're lucky and it's just an old mineshaft. Jess shook her head. It's not just an old mineshaft. We aren't ever that lucky. Dr. Desdemona tossed Jess a harness. Gear up, Jess. You're going in first. Rappelling will be faster than the winch. We can use that to come back up, but we can just rappel down. Don't worry, we'll cover you if anything happens. Amber nodded. Jess caught the harness, but didn't respond. For a moment she contemplated just refusing. She didn't want to go down there, at least not first. Finally she began to step into the belt. Fine, but Amber comes with me. No worries, Jess, I got your back. Amber grabbed a second harness from the ATV and the two prepared to rappel down. Tori held their weapons while they finished tightening their gear and then passed them floodlights. It'll be dark down there. The two nodded and got into position, leaning backwards into the shaft. Morthos, Tori, and the doc watched the two drop down, lowering themselves bit by bit until they reached the bottom. We'll go down next. Desdemona tapped Morthos. Tori, you stay here and watch the scanner. Stay on the radio and keep us on the path. The doctor donned the harness and then ready to descend with Morthos. Keep that winch ready for our extract. That's about 200 feet down. Tori gave a thumbs up and reached for the comms. Jess, do you read me? Yes, we're at the bottom. There's a few passages. Old mine tunnels, which way? The doc and Morthos are headed down. Is there a north passage? No, there's a northwest. Will that work? Let's try it. It probably veers north. The signal is still active up there. Tori began to guide them as they moved into the tunnels. Jess and Amber's floodlights illuminated the way. The Doctor and Morthos followed just after them, keeping their own lights on the ceiling and floor. Between the four of them it was actually pretty well lit. The mine tunnel was made of red rock and lumber. "You're getting closer." Tori's voice came over the radio again. The deeper they got, the worse the connection seemed to get. "Probably about 100 feet or so and you'll get to a bend." Tori's voice on the radio was distorted by static and interference. "Tori, the radio's barely working, how far after the turn?" The radio crackled again, only bits and pieces fully coming through. "Another 100 feet. The static cut into Tori's words. "You'll be able to see a turn. Just around that corner about 100 feet is the power source." "Hold on. See anything?" The team shone their lights towards the upcoming bend in the passageway. "No, I don't see anything," Jess said over the radio, not even sure if he could hear her. She raised her rifle. Some sort of pulse suddenly emitted through the tunnel, vibrating the entire passageway. It washed over and past the team and all the floodlights went out. "What the hell just happened?" Amber's voice hissed in the darkness. The only thing visible for a second was the glow of Desdemona's cigar as he took a long drag. "That seemed like an EMP to me," he said calmly. Jess tried her cell phone. "Dead. Flashlight. Dead." "No, this isn't an EMP, that wouldn't kill all our batteries." "Maybe it's a magic EMP," the doc suggested sarcastically. He lifted his cigar lighter and clicked the flame on, bringing just a little light to the group. Morthos stepped close to the Doctor, opening his grimoire. "Hold on." An arcane light illuminated the area as Morthos stood in the center of the hallway, his grimoire held aloft in front of him. "Lucem in tenebris. Proferens lucem in tenebris." A purple light spread from his grimoire, transitioning from the supernatural glimmer into a bright indigo glow around the entire tunnel, 50 feet in each direction. The team let out a breath of relief, as if the darkness had been suffocating them. Everyone was on edge. "We should go back," Jess whispered. The light from the spell gave the passage a creepy blue hue. Amber and Morthos looked at the doc for confirmation. Before he could answer, there was a metal groan from up ahead. Metal shifting, moving, scraping against rock. "Yes," the Doctor replied as he reached under his coat. He pulled out his sidearm, Constance. "Yes, we should." Clank! 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 Heavy footsteps echoed as the group began to backpedal. Amber and Jess kept their rifles trained on the corner while Morthos maintained his chant. It was little more than a whisper, but the tunnel remained dimly lit with blue light. The curve ahead was barely visible, just enough to vaguely see a shape moving around the bend. "Contact!" Amber whispered loudly. "Hold fire!" The doc quickly commanded. He wanted to see what the thing was. A metal foot came into view first, then a leg, then its torso. A large, rusty machine turned to face their direction. The thick, bipedal mech stepped towards them. In place of a right arm it had a large cylindrical cannon, and in the second was a long multi-barreled machine gun, which it raised to point down the corridor at the team. "All right, now open fire." Jess and Amber opened fire in unison. The noise was overwhelming in the small corridor. The bullets ricocheted off the machine's armor, spattering into the dirt, wall, and ceiling. Their small arms fire did not seem to affect the mech. "Everyone down!" The cylindrical barrel began to spin as the Gatling gun raised towards them. Thunk! There was a flash from Constance and an explosion enveloped the mech in flame. The Doctor's empty 40mm casing clattered to the ground while he reached into his coat for a second artillery shell. Amber's voice cried out, "Take cover!" Bullets spat out from the Gatling gun, shredding the entire tunnel with its deadly lead. Dr. Desdemona shoved Morthos down, feeling multiple impacts against his body armor. He'd definitely have some bruises from that. He slid across the floor to take cover by one of the beams. He could feel his rib aching. It was probably cracked. Damn. Morthos' spell dropped, leaving the tunnel illuminated only by the flashes from the Gatling gun's unrelenting barrage. Finally the hail of bullets ceased as it began to switch to a new ammunition case. It's reloading. Amber and Jess leaned out from either side of the tunnel, emptying magazine after magazine at the machine. Morthos flipped through his grimoire, trying to find another spell he could use. It was too dark to read, but he at least knew from memory where it was in his tome. "Doc, I need light." Another deadly spray of bullets erupted, centering this time on Amber. She winced in pain as a bullet tore through her leg. "Fuck, I'm hit." Thump. Another 40mm shell leapt from the doctor's hand cannon. The explosion rocked the mech, giving everyone a moment of respite. Desdemona flicked his lighter for Morthos. The little flame was all he could do without a working flashlight. Dirt and debris was now actively raining down on the entire corridor. The machine lowered its Gatling gun and began to power up its right arm cannon instead. The super tech began to pulse with a yellow light as it charged up the weapon, ready to incinerate the entire team with one blast. Morthos stood, grimoire aloft in front of him with hand outstretched. The flame from the doc's cigar lighter was just enough. Agrum vis impassibilis, scutum tutili. An arcane barrier materialized in the center of the tunnel. A glassy white shield spread out in fractals just as the mech's cannon fired. The energy weapon struck into the magical barrier and exploded. The fiery blast swelled but could not penetrate through Morthos' shield. The damage to the passageway was irreparable, particularly on the mech's side of the magical barrier. The tunnel began to split and shake as rock and dirt began to collapse down from the ceiling. The dock started to run. "Everyone retreat." Morthos closed his grimoire and went to help Jess lift Amber. The three began to run, Amber hopping along with an arm around each of her friend's shoulders. They could hear the mech giving chase, charging up its cannon for a second shot. The tunnel collapse was imminent, beams and rubble cascaded onto the mech, blocking its way. The Corvidae team was just far enough ahead of the cave-in that only dirt and sediment was falling on them so far. They heard the mech blast its cannon again, vaporizing the debris in its way. Amber looked back, seeing the machine take a few steps more, pushing its way slowly through the dirt and rubble. Covered in blood and dust, they emerged into the mine shaft where they had come from. "Get us the fuck out of here," Jess shouted up to Tori, clipping her harness onto the winch hook. "Everyone hook in, Tori can lift us all together." Amber winced through the pain, grabbing at her bloody leg. That machine isn't dead, it's still coming. Once the four of them had clipped in, Tori hit the winch lever and it began to hoist them up. Their feet left the ground and they hung suspended by their harnesses, lifting higher and higher. The doc took the opportunity to slip a new shell into his shorty 40, then looked at Amber's leg. "You got shot," he said dryly. "That's very inconvenient." "No shit," Amber hissed. "Maybe you can do something about it?" The doc motioned to their harnesses as they ascended slowly towards the surface. "A little hard to do right here. Maybe at the top if we have time." Amber rolled her eyes and pulled her neck scarf off, pressing it hard onto her leg. "Are you all okay?" Tori's voice could be heard from the top of the shaft. The doc looked down at the rubble beginning to move at the mine entrance. "That remains to be seen." There was a slight hint of glee in his eyes as the mech began to emerge from the red rock. The machine was damaged pretty badly from the cave-in and its own cannon blasts, but it still was able to raise its Gatling gun at them again. They were sitting ducks. Tempus constringitor ad vos et vosis adhesit. Morthos' elbows bumped both Jess and the doc while he began to cast a spell. It was a successful incantation, despite the awkward and limited space between them. The magic took hold and the mech seized up, unable to move. Its metal joints groaned as it tried to push against the magic holding it in place. "I'm gonna lose it." He gritted his teeth, trying to focus on the spell. "I can't maintain this much longer." Beads of sweat dripped down from Morthos' forehead. They were now about 75 feet in the air and climbing. Morthos could tell his magic was about to give way. As they got further away, his strength on the machine weakened. They'd only make it halfway to the top of the mineshaft before the spell would release, leaving them to be perforated by the Gatling gun. Amber pulled 2 grenades from her chest rig and looked down at the mech. "Chew on these, you motherfucking robot." She pulled the pins and let them fall free. Boom boom. The 2 explosives went off right in front of the machine's head. Morthos exhaled, letting the spell end as the mech fell face first onto the mine shaft floor. The next 100 feet of ascension was silent. What was that thing? Tori shouted as they reached the top. He pulled Amber up first and she cried out in pain. Ow, fuck! She grabbed onto Tori. Careful, my leg is hit. Tori winced at her bloody leg and helped her hop over to the ATV. The doc stepped close with his medical bag. Take this, it'll help with the pain. The doc injected a blue serum into Amber's leg and she sat back in the chair, focusing on her breathing. There, see? You'll be fine. He pulled out a tourniquet from his bag and slipped it on above the wound. Amber growled through the pain as he tightened the rod. We have to go back down and get that thing, she said through heavy breaths. Amber looked dirty, hurting and in pain, yet determined. This mech is smaller than the one from Iraq, but it's definitely the same type of thing. She looked pointedly at the doctor. QB will want to take a look. The doctor stood up and nodded. He stepped back over to the ledge. Contemplating, he lit up another cigar. It was his last one. He'd have to restock when they got back to Perth. There's no way he was going on another 21-hour flight back to the States without a smoke. Jess joined him at the ledge. That damn near killed us all. The doc ignored her. There was no question and thus needed no response. The statement was an obvious one, so needed no acknowledgement either. He thought for a moment. Amber was right, they would need to get this machine back to QB. The cargo plane could carry it no problem, but how to get it back to the States? He was remotely aware of Jess staring at him still. Do you have any friends in the shipping industry? He asked. What? Any here in Australia, that is? What are you talking about? The mech. I think we'll need to ship it. Never mind. Go down and bring it back up here, we'll take it to the plane, then we need to figure out how to ship it to the United States. I'm not going back down there. Jess protested. It's disabled, it can't hurt you now. It could. It might still explode. Or be leaking radiation. Or have a little savage alien inside. I don't want to touch that thing or go anywhere near it. Here. Amber tried to stand up, leaning on Morthos and Tori. I'll go back down and check it. I have the sonic screwdriver, I can make sure the lights are out on that thing permanently. No. The doc held up a hand. Temporarily. He turned to face everyone, nodding. All right team, go bring her up. He walked past the group, heading back towards the plane. He had to call mission control. This was a good op. Good results. No casualties. He tapped Morthos on the shoulder as he walked past. Good heresy back there, kid. Keep up the good work. The occultist expert smiled, nodding. Magic was a strange and supernatural thing. He loved it, loved testing the boundaries of the world. His magic had saved the team at least twice today for sure. No problem, Doc. Tori moved the second ATV up to the mine and began lowering the second winch. Hopefully the doctor was right and there weren't any more unpleasant surprises with the mech. Tori looked over at Jess. She was frowning with her arms crossed. Don't worry. Morthos, Amber, and I can take care of this. She sighed and joined him at the ATV. Be careful. Not only are there huge bugs, spiders, and all that shit here, now there's giant robots that shoot laser cannons. Fucking Australia. The entire team laughed and began the final stage of their mission in the Outback. Retrieval and extract. Back in the plane, the doc opened his laptop, enjoying his last cigar. 00013. Contacting Mission Control. Corvidae, reporting in. And we're down.